Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The highlights of the Seera. We are now in the 6th year of the Hijrah, precisely in the month of Sha'ban of this year. I am picking up the important events. In that month, the Prophet sent this mission led by Abdurrahman ibn Auf with 700 of the companions of the Prophet to a place called Dawmat al-Jandal. The importance about this mission is the orders of the Prophet to the group. He said, you go and you fight only for the cause of God. Don't cheat, don't break promises, don't humiliate or mutilate, and don't kill children. This is the covenant of God and the way of his Prophet. So we take from this particular garrison the rules of engagement in Islam, the way the Prophet taught it to his people. What happened, this group were, majority were Christians, and when they were approached, and obviously we have to understand that this is now a political movement. The Islam, to be safe and secure, has to control the different areas of Arabia, because the enemies, whether they were the Jews who were defeated in certain situations or the Kafirs of Quraysh, were continuously negotiating and trying to find a gap so that they can penetrate through it to the Prophet. And it became very clear strategically that the peninsula should be completely neutralized, either by being Muslims or by accepting Islam as a reality. And so the way with the people of the book was either you become a Muslim or you pay taxes to the state, which is the jizya. We got to understand several things, because the jizya was misused by the enemies of Islam to give Islam a bad name. The jizya, number one, was not as much as the zakat. It is a taxation for those people to be protected by the Muslims in case of war. Number two, it was ordained on those only who are capable to fight, while zakat was on every man, woman, child, fetus, old man, young man. So at the end, a family will pay more zakat, much more zakat, than they pay jizya. When the group of the Prophet, led by Abdurrahman ibn Auf, approached those people and they offered to them the conditions, the head of the group, called Al-Asbagh ibn Amr al-Nasrani, he became a Muslim. And some of his people became Muslims, some did not. And they decided to pay the dues or the taxes, which is the jizya. Abdurrahman ibn Auf, with the instructions of the Prophet, proposed to the daughter of the chief. And this is very important because it is illustrating what we talked about before, that the marriages of the Prophet were a way of building alliances, the way alliances were built in tribal Arabia at that time. So it's not only him, but he ordered his army leader to propose to the daughter of the chief, which was considered at that time a great honor to both sides. And because of that, the whole group eventually became Muslims and established very good relations. There is another story that called, and I'll mention it because with all honesty I have major reservations about it, but it is mentioned in the books of the Seerah. It is called the story of Uqal and Urayna or Arina, which is about a group of people who came to the Prophet saying that they are Muslims. They gave the bay'ah, which is the pledge of allegiance. They were very sick, and the Prophet ordered them to be kept in a nice dry place and to be treated, and he gave them camels and sheep and things to use. Once they became healthy, they came to the man that the Prophet sent to them and killed him and mutilated him and took everything and ran away. So the Prophet sent someone to follow them, and he got them. The story goes as saying that then when they were arrested, the Prophet ordered that they should be treated the same way they treated the Muslim whom they killed. So they were chopped and mutilated, and their eyes were poked out, and so on and so forth. I have major reservation, as I said, because this standing so odd compared to the character of the Prophet throughout the Seera, who prevented mutilating even a dead body, needless to say, a living person. And it is the responsibility of scholars who should be revisionists to question such stories and study it, because it does not fit the flow that we know about the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his compassion. The next important thing that happened to this during this year is what we call Ghazwat al-Hudaybiyah, the Battle of Hudaybiyah, and we will see that this was not actually a battle. What happened, the Prophet saw in his vision that he entered the Masjid al-Haram in Mecca, and he was accompanied by the believers. So he decided to do Umrah on this year, and he asked all the Muslims to get ready. He got some of the tribes around, and they went to do the Umrah. He ordered that they should take the animals or the cattle that they are going to slay there, and he ordered all his followers to put the swords in their shields. In other words, they don't appear in a fighting posture, and they should not take any other kind of weapons. When he reached a place called Asfan, he sent some people to explore what is the situation, and those people came to him gathering intelligence that Quraysh is adamant that the Prophet should not be allowed to enter Mecca. So here the Prophet and the Muslims were excluded and denied a right that was given to any person in Arabia. His intelligence told him that they prepared themselves to fight, and they put their troops under the leadership of Khalid ibn al-Walid, who was not a Muslim, and accompanied by 200 people, strong fighters, and recruited all the people to fight. The Prophet then said, I want someone to take a road that will not lead to confrontation. In other words, the Prophet was so keen not to have a fighting in Mecca, because this is Al-Masjid al-Haram, this is the place that should be peaceful, so he did not want any fighting in Mecca. So they landed in a place called Al-Hudaybiyah, and he tried to settle there and to see what's going to happen. He received a messenger from Quraysh, came to ask, why did you people come? And the answer to him was, we came like anybody to do Umrah, and we are not here to fight. They sent another man called Hulis ibn Alqamah. He was ahead of a very tough group called Al-Ahabish. They were allies with Quraysh, and so the man went to see what is going on. The Prophet here said, who is coming? They said, that person is coming. And the Prophet said, those are people who honor Al-Hadi. Al-Hadi, which is the sheep that you slay as an offering in Mecca. So he said, when he comes, drive the Hadi to be the first thing that this man sees. The reason I'm mentioning that, it is showing that the leader has great knowledge about the different individuals. No leader can lead a group without this kind of wisdom and the ability to differentiate the different personalities and what will work with them, what will make them tick, so to speak. So he knew that this man, when he sees the Hajj, he will be in a different frame of mind. So the man, when he saw that, he was very impressed, and he went back to Quraysh and said, Are you out of your mind? You prevented this man from the house of God while you open this house to everybody in Arabia, whether he is worth it or not. I would suggest that you don't stand in his way. What they told him, you are not shrewd enough. لا علم لك بالمكايد. You don't know the tricks that we do here. And they sent another person called Arwa ibn Mas'ud al-Thaqafi. He was the head of the people of Ta'if. Remember the Ta'if, the hijrah that the Prophet tried to have there, and he was stoned and humiliated, and he came back when he was in Mecca. He went to the Prophet and said, you Muhammad, you gathered people who are not the honorable people of Arabia, from low classes of Arabia, and you come here to your own people, your own origins. We pledged that you will not attack Mecca, you will not enter Mecca unless we allow you. And if you think that you can fight us, let me tell you that those rubbish people that you brought, he is talking about these scattered tribes, will leave you during the fight, will run away, and you will be left alone. And he was holding the beard of the Prophet while he was talking. Abu Bakr was pushing his hand and got very upset, and he told him, how dare you say that we leave him alone? You just don't understand our position and our situation. He will never be left alone. The man stayed some time there, and he noticed one thing. Probably it is mentioned with some exaggeration, but he noticed that there is genuine love between the Prophet and his followers. He went back and told the people of Mecca, and he told them literally, O people of Quraysh, I visited Kisra, the head of the king of Persia, in his kingdom. I visited Caesar, the king of Rome, in his majesty. I did not find a king loved by his people like Muhammad amongst his followers. So my recommendation to you, if he offers you a good offer, a face-saving offer, you accept it. And accept whatever he offers, because you cannot imagine how those people will fight for that leader. What happened to Quraysh then? Decided to accept some kind of negotiation. The Prophet sent to Osman ibn Affan and 10 people to negotiate. The 10 people, by the way, were people who have their relatives and their families in Mecca, and they found this an opportunity that they visit with them. So they asked the Prophet to be there with Osman to enter under that kind of amnesty or ceasefire. Nonetheless, Osman entered in under the protection of a certain person in Mecca. So he allowed them to go and to visit with their families, and he sent a message to al-mustadafin, the oppressed. Those are the Muslims in Mecca who were unable to leave, whether because they were so weak or so poor or just their masters prevented them from leaving. He said, go and tell those people, I am coming to you with good news. Eventually the truth will prevail and you will be liberated. When Osman went, they jumped on him and on those 10 people, and they took them as prisoners. So the news came to the Prophet that Osman was killed. It was a rumor, but he was actually imprisoned, arrested, not killed. Him and those people who came with him. History tells us that they offered Osman to go ahead and enjoy your Umrah. Go and circumambulate the Kaaba. Go around the Kaaba. This is something that Arabs used to hold very dearly. The response of Osman was very impressive. He said, how dare you think that I will do something that I know that Muhammad is not given the same access to. And here he is inside Mecca, few steps from Kaaba, and he refuses to go around the Kaaba because Muhammad was not allowed to do that. So when the news went to the Prophet that Uthman is killed, the factors of the equation now changed completely. So the Prophet said, I will not leave until I declare war with them. And this shows us again the importance of all the people to the leader. He decided to change the plan. He came in peace. Now there is no place for peace. And he called the people to give him bay'ah for fighting. This is a different kind of bay'ah now. The bay'ah in Medina was to protect him, protect Medina, etc., and to have alliances. Here he took a bay'ah to fight, that we will fight with you. He took this bay'ah under a tree that was there, and it was called then the bay'ah or the pledge of the tree. Shajarat al-Ridwan, it is called. It was given the name of the tree of Ridwan. Ridwan means the pleasing of God, because the Quran mentioned this event. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يُبَايِعُونَكَ تَحْتَ الشَّجَرَةِ عَلِمَ اللَّهُ مَا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ. Then the verse mentioned that those are people with whom God is pleased. This event was recorded in the Quran. لقد رضي الله عن المؤمنين إذ يبايعونك تحت الشجرة فعلم ما في قلوبهم فأنزل السكينة عليهم وأثابهم فتحا قريبا. So here the Quran is saying that Allah is pleased with those who gave the pledge to you under the tree. He knew what is there in their hearts, so He tranquilized them and He rewarded them with a victory that will come soon. So this tree was honored to a great extent by this very important event, and of course because human beings are fascinated by things that are tangible, there was that fear that the tree itself will become an icon. So Umar ibn Khattab during his time uprooted this tree and he cut it and finished it completely so that he doesn't create another shrine close to Al-Kaaba, which was a great decision, can only be done by a great and brave man like Omar, because it was against the emotions and the sentiments of the people. During this bay'ah under the tree, the Muslims come and put their hands on the hand of the Prophet and they give their pledge the way it was done in Arabia. So the Prophet put his hand on his hand and said, this is the bay'ah of Osman. In other words, it is so touching to know that the absent is not absent, that still he is present in the hearts of the group. Quraysh, when they knew that this bay'ah took place, they started sending some groups for certain skirmishes. The Prophet got 12 of them as prisoners. One of the Muslims was also killed. So there was kind to the brink really about to have a war. At that time, the Kafirs believed really that the Prophet means business here and they better send someone to negotiate a kind of treaty. They sent a very shrewd man called Suhail ibn Amr to negotiate a kind of agreement. He came and told the Prophet what happened about these fightings and about arresting this group was not done by our wise people. It was done by some irresponsible people. شيء قام به السفهاء منا, the irresponsible, weak-minded people. So you send to us your prisoners and we send yours. He said, I will not send my prisoners unless you send it to me back, the Muslims. So they sent Osman and the other 10 people, and they were received, of course, a great reception by the Prophet. Suhail came and started negotiation, and he came with certain conditions. He said, number one, that there will be a ceasefire between Muslims and the Quraysh for 4 years. Number two, every Muslim who runs from the Muslim camp to Quraysh, they keep. Every kafir who runs to the Muslims, Muslims have to return. Number three, the Prophet returns back without Umrah this year as a face-saving compromise, but he comes the next year for Umrah, but without weapons. The fourth condition, that whoever wants to join Muhammad other than Quraysh, that's okay with Quraysh, and whoever wants to join Quraysh against Muhammad, that should be okay with Muhammad. The Prophet accepted the 4 conditions. The Muslims couldn't take it. They felt that this is such an unfair deal, and the 2 things that particularly bothered them. Number 1, how come that if one of us goes to them, they keep, while if someone from them comes to us, we have to return. They said this is unfair, no equality here, and they just felt that this is very humiliating. The thing that bothered them even more, that you, the messenger of God, said that we will come here and do Umrah, and those kafirs make us return empty-handed without doing it. It was recorded that Umar ibn Khattab was very upset. And some of the believers said, how come the Quran said that he saw لَتَدْخُلُنَّ الْمَسْجِدَ الْحَرَامَ إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ آمِنِينَ, that he saw that we will enter the Masjid al-Haram and then we are not entering it. And when they told that, Abu Bakr, he said, did Quran say in which year? So this was a strong argument that the promise is still there, and you don't have to stick to your own interpretation because of your desire or your emotion. The Quran said you will enter the Masjid al-Haram, you will enter the Masjid al-Haram. You are the one who are interpreting it as now. Quran didn't say now. So the Prophet said, okay, let us slay the sheep and cut our hair, which means that the state of Ihram finished, that we are not going then to do Umrah. And he told the believers to do that, and the big argument and the big row and shouting and screaming and people splitting and accusing each other, a complete chaos. He was very saddened. He entered to his tent and he was very concerned. And his wife, Salama, told him, what is upsetting you that much? He said, I am concerned about them because God said that if people disobey their prophet, he will not give them victory. And now they are about to disobey me. That shows the wisdom of this woman who told him, who said that they disobeyed you. You have to understand that their hearts are broken. They are devastated. She showed great understanding and compassion that probably will occur to a woman rather than a man. She thought about the intuition of a lady and of a mother. She felt for them. And as a matter of fact, she told the Prophet, she told him, you, the messenger of God, you did not order them and they disobey. أُعْذُرْهُمْ, find an excuse for them. You carried on yourself something very big by having this treaty. They are going back without the fath that you talked about. They are makrubun. They are depressed, saddened. So get out from here and go to them and do what you wanted to be done and see what will happen. And this turned out to be probably the life-saving for the Muslim Ummah in this advice. The Prophet went out, he called the man who cuts hair and told him, cut my hair. He got his sheep and slayed his sheep. And all of them did the same. Because now they saw in a tangible, concrete way that this is the decision of the Prophet. It moved from theory to implementation. It moved from talk to action. When he took that action, all of them followed him, and the Prophet started gathering the troops to go back. 2 interesting things happened. Number 1, when they told the Prophet, how come our people, their people, when they come to us, we return them, the Prophet has a wisdom here. If a Muslim goes back to them, we don't need him. We don't need him in our ranks. He is a liability, not an asset. If one from them comes to us, he must be a great believer. If we return back to them, he will be a thorn in their side. He will be a liability to them. This was the wisdom of the leader. And he actually implemented it. A person came, called Abu Jandal ibn Suhail, and said, I am coming to you, messenger of God. I am barely made it out. and I want to join the Muslims. And the Prophet told him, we had a treaty. You have to go back. Quraysh came, said, give us the man back. He, of course, was, you can imagine how heartbroken he was, but he said, take him back. Abu Jandal was escorted by 2 guards from Quraysh. When they reached Mecca, he tricked them, he killed both of them, and he ran away. And he joined the group, and he formed the first guerrilla war. That was one of the major reasons of the attrition of Quraysh until the time of opening Mecca happened. So it actually showed that there is a certain wisdom in certain actions. Another thing that happened, because it shows also that for every rule there should be certain exceptions. At that time, a woman ran away called Kulthum bint Uqbah ibn Abi Mu'ayt. She is the sister of Osman ibn Affan, a sister from his mother's side. She went to the Prophet, and here is a situation. We have an agreement, so are we going to return that woman to them? She talked to him. She told him, O Messenger of God, I am a woman. If I go back to them, they can do with me things that will really, I can't stand. So you see what you want me to do and I'll do, but I am telling you that this will be wrong. The Quran came saying, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا جاءكم المؤمنات مهاجرات فامتحنوهن الله أعلم بإيمانهن فإن علمتموهن مؤمنات فلا ترجعوهن إلى الكفار لا هن حل لهم ولا هم يحلون لهن وآتوهم ما أنفقوا ولا جناح عليكم أن تنكحوهن إذا آتيتموهن أجورهن ولا تمسكوا بعصم الكوافر واسألوا ما أنفقتم وليسألوا ما أنفقوا ذلكم حكم الله يحكم بينكم والله عليم حكيم. Let me go through the paraphrasing of the translation. O you who attend to faith, if the believer women came to you migrating, question them, test them. If it appears to you that they came because of their faith, and actually that test was to ask the woman, did you come here because you want a better life, or because you want to marry another man, or you wanted to seek some benefits, or did you come just for the sake of Allah and following His messenger? So those were very specific questions. If these women say, we came just for Allah and for following His messenger, he said, don't return them back. But give their husbands, the kafirs' husbands, the money they spent on them. Fair and square deal. Somebody will say, suppose a woman will say that just to get out. It might. This is why the Quran said, Allahu a'lamu bi-imanihin. Allah knows, but you take things on face value. At the same time, the rule was set that the same thing will happen. If you have a kafir woman who is with you and doesn't want to stay, wants to go back, she goes back and you expect and you ask for the money you spent on her. In other words, Quran here set a practical rule. That treaty of Hudaybiyah will be implementable for men, because men can resist and can fight and have their tricks. At least at that time they have more capabilities and more maneuverability than women. But women, both sides will be excluded. And so that actually what happened. The people from Mecca who came to the Muslims and were returned turned out to be a great asset for the Muslims after that. Qurayshans sent to the Prophet asking him to cancel this clause in the treaty. They don't want anybody to be delivered back, or they deliver anybody back. They said cancel that. And the believers, the Muslims, not only were very happy, but they were reassured that this leader has a certain wisdom. It might not be very clear to you on the spot, but eventually it comes back. Let us see the situation now after Hudaybiyah. As we notice, Quran described Hudaybiyah as Fath. As a matter of fact, Surah Al-Fath was talking about Hudaybiyah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا فتحنا لك فتحا مبينا ليغفر لك الله ما تقدم من ذنبك وما تأخر ويتم نعمته عليك ويهديك صراطا مستقيما وينصرك الله نصرا عزيزا. We have given you victory that is very clear. مبينا. Allah will forgive you all your mistakes, past or future. He will complete and perfect His blessings upon you. You here is the leader, goes to all the group, because after that came Quran, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي. In other words, this is the harbinger of the completion of the religion and the final victory, and guide you to the straight path, and He will give you victory that is really mighty and strong. وَيَنْصُرَكَ اللَّهُ نَصْرًا عَزِيزًا. Then He reminds the Prophet, هو الذي أنزل السكينة في قلوب المؤمنين ليزدادوا إيمانا مع إيمانهم. He put the tranquility in the hearts of the believers so that their faith will increase. So from here we know that faith increases and it decreases. ليزدادوا إيمانا مع إيمانهم, to add more belief to their belief. And to Allah belongs all the powers of heavens and earth. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلِيمًا حَكِيمًا. Allah is full of knowledge and of wisdom. So Hudaybiyah actually was what we call in modern terms a political victory. There was no fighting, but in terms of the strategy of the end result, it is considered as the beginning of the final victory, which turned out to be true. Now the Prophet comes back to Medina and he is secure. He is finished with the hypocrites are exposed. The Jewish opposition and the plotting in Medina and around Medina is completely neutralized. We will notice that there is still one pocket in Khaybar that is still there that he will deal with later. But in actuality, the direct threat to the new state is neutralized. Now he has a treaty with Quraysh for 4 years. For the first time now, there looks to be a time of peace. Now Islam locally is almost established. Globally, it should reach out. So we enter the era of communicating with the different kings and leaders of the world at that time, which is called Mukatabat al-Muluk, starting to send messages and the messengers to the different kings, different states that are around or are known to people. He sent a message to Caesar, king of Rome, and he says from Muhammad ibn Abdullah to Herakl. Herakl is the name of the Caesar at the time, Azim al-Rum, the great man of Rome. Here we notice that there is politeness. This is probably the earliest, what we call it, diplomacy that we know. He told him, peace be upon those who follow the good guidance. I call you the calling of Islam. When you submit to God, you become safe. People take this as he was threatening him, that if you submit, you become safe, otherwise we'll get you. No, this doesn't mean that. It is like all of us tell ourselves and each other, if you follow Islam, you will prosper, you will be good in this life, you will be good in the hereafter. It was not a threat to Caesar. Muhammad cannot threaten Caesar at that time according to the rules of the game. He told him, if you submit to God, you become safe and God will reward you several times. If you turn away, you carry the responsibility of al-arisiyin, which means the peasants. In other words, there are oppressed people under you, the common people, who will only have a chance to know about Islam if you allow it. If you don't, in the day of judgment, you carry this responsibility on your conscience. And it is very fascinating where the Prophet actually was targeting. He was targeting the poor people, the common people in the Roman Empire. And he quoted the Quran, قُلْ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ تَعَالَوْا إِلَى كَلِمَةٍ سَوَاءٍ بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكُمْ أَلَّا نَعْبُدَ إِلَّا اللَّهَ وَلَا نُشْرِكَ بِهِ شَيْئًا وَلَا يَتَّخِذَ بَعْضُنَا بَعْضًا أَرْبَابًا مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ فَإِنْ تَوَلَّوْا فَقُولُوا اشْهَدُوا بِأَنَّا مُسْلِمُونَ. The verse says, O people of the book, come to an equal word between us and you on a common ground, that we should not worship other than Allah, we should not associate partners with Him, we should not take each other as gods other than the real God. If they turn away, no threatening here. Say, Ishhadu bi anna Muslimun. We are telling you we are submitting to God. So this was the message that went to Caesar. When this message reached Caesar, obviously he was a very wise man. He said, I need to talk to somebody who knows this man. They looked around. There was Abu Sufyan ibn Harb. He was at the area of Syria at that time with a caravan, and Caesar called Abu Sufyan to see him. Let us remember that Abu Sufyan is the arch enemy of the Prophet at that time. He is the head of Quraysh, and so he goes to Caesar and he asks him certain significant questions. He asked him, who are the ancestors of this man? كيف نسب هذا الرجل فيكم? What kind of family he is coming from? He said he is from a great lineage. He is from a great family. He said, was any one of you said the same things he is saying before? The answer was no. He said, do you accuse him of lying? Does he lie? He said, no, we don't know that he lies. He said, who follows him? The important people or the poor people? He said, the poor people. The next question, which is very shrewd, he said, do they increase or decrease? The answer was, they increase. Then he said, does any one of them revert back to go to the old religion? He said, we didn't know any of these cases. He said, does he fight you? He said, yes, there is a war between us and him. He said, how is he in war? He said, al-harbu sajal. Sometimes he wins, sometimes he loses. He said, what does he order you to do? He said, he orders us not to worship what our ancestors used to worship. He orders a prayer and saying the truth and chastity and keeping the pledges and returning the trust to its due people. So Caesar here said, it seems that this man is a messenger. If you told me he was followed by the big people, I'll say he's a politician. If you say he's afraid to fight you, he's not. If you say he's lying, he's not lying. But I feel that there is something about this man. And he called his people and said, if what I heard is true, this man will occupy the place I am in now. They said that Abu Sufyan told his people there was a big row, a big noise. They got very noisy and they took them out. They took Abu Sufyan and all the Arabs who came. In other words, there is a private meeting now. History says when Abu Sufyan went out, he said, لَقَدْ بَلَغَ أَمْرُ بْنِ أَبِي كَبْشَةَ أَنْ يَخَافَهُ مَلِكْ بَنِي الْأَصْفَرِ. When they used to ridicule the Prophet, they called him Ibn Abi Kabsha. And he says, look at that, Ibn Abi Kabsha, the Caesar of Rome is afraid from him. Caesar collected his people and locked the doors because he wanted them to stay until they hear him. And he said, do you want really prosperity and good guidance? Follow this man. They really revolted, got very upset, rushed to the doors. And so Caesar was a politician after all. He said, I was just examining you, seeing how loyal you are to Rome, and he let go. So at least from this history that is available, Caesar came that close to be a Muslim, but for his political considerations and the situation in his country, he decided not to. Then he sent another messenger called Al-Harith ibn Umair al-Azdi to the prince of Busra. Busra is again another small kingdom. Remember, all these kings were assigned by Caesar of Rome. The world was divided between two big major powers, the Romans and the Persians. So those were assigned by the Caesar of Rome. He sent to him with a message from the Prophet. The moment Al-Harith ibn Umair reached the place, said, this is a message to the king, to the prince. They tore the message and killed the guy. And he was the only ambassador of the Prophet that was killed. And the Prophet was extremely saddened by this situation. Then he sent to a man called Al-Harith ibn Ashmar. Then he sent a message to Al-Muqawqis. Al-Muqawqis was the prince of Egypt, who was assigned again by the Roman Empire. And the message said, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, min Muhammad Rasulillah. Here he didn't say Ibn Abdullah. Why, we really don't know. But he put his title, إلى المقوقس عظيم القبط, the great man of the Egyptian Christians. Peace upon those who follow guidance. I call you with the calling of Islam. If you submit to God, you become safe, and God will reward you double. فإن توليت, if you turn away, فعليك إثم القبط. Again, there is no threat here. But what happens if you refuse? Carry your responsibility. So the Muqawqis called the man whom the Prophet sent, a man called Hatib. He told him, if your prophet is a real prophet, that took place, by the way, in Alexandria. If your man is a real prophet, what is the big deal? Why he doesn't call God to destroy his enemies rather than going through all this hassle and sending all over the place? So Hatib told him, do you believe in Jesus? He said, yes. He said, do you believe that people grabbed Jesus to kill him? He said, yes. He said, did Jesus ask God to destroy them? He said, no. He said, so why Muhammad should ask God to destroy his enemy if Jesus did not? So the man told him, you did fine. أنت حكيم جاء من عند حكيم. You are a wise man sent by a wise man. This shows us also the accurate selection of the Prophet to the different ambassadors he sends to people. Then after that he sent a message to the king of Persia. And it is again starting almost like all the messages. And then the king of Persia tore the message into pieces and kicked the guy out and told him, go to Muhammad and tell him, next year I'm getting my army to finish him. And the Prophet said, may Allah break his kingdom. And interestingly, the son of this man conspired against his father and killed him. At the very time when he was sending people to gather troops against Muhammad, the new king, like always new kings, stopped all the plans of the previous king, and so the Prophet was not attacked. This is now the 7th year of Hijrah, and it starts by preparing to finish the last showdown with the Jews of that area, who were taking always a stand against the Prophet and the believers. They were now gathering in Khaybar, and they were from there launching that campaign to try to gather people against the Prophet. After the Prophet finished from Hudaybiyah, he called the people who were around Medina, some of the different tribes, and those who were with him in Hudaybiyah, and those who refrained from joining him before. They are called in Arabic al-Mukhallafun, which means those who stayed behind. They came and said, we wanted to join now. Now the Prophet puts them to a test. He says, if you join, you got to prove to yourselves and to me that this is for the cause of God, so you will not have any share of the spoils of war. Those who want to join on that condition will join. Those who won't, we don't want them. So what happened? Some of them, of course, joined, and some of them did not. When they reached close to Khaybar, and Khaybar in essence was a military complex. It is 3 huge fortifications. Each one of them is divided into 3 citadels or castles. So when they came close, they started saying Allahu Akbar, saying takbir, chanting takbir. The Prophet noticed that they are exhausting themselves. He said, you are not calling someone who is deaf or far, you are calling someone who hears everything. That's God, and so close. So be kind on yourselves, don't exhaust yourselves in takbir, and save your energy for the confrontation. Anyways, the confrontation took place. We'll not go through the details of the battle, but what happened, that this Jewish population at the time put a very stubborn fight. So the Prophet attacked the first castle. They refused to surrender, so he ordered cutting the palm trees to scare them and to show them that they will starve. They insisted to fight, so he stopped the cutting. So the cutting was not meant for destruction, but was meant to send to them a message. The message didn't work, so he stopped it. Anyways, they got intelligence information about a place where there are lots of weaponry there. Umar ibn Khattab took some of the troops and concentrated on this area. They stormed it. The people of Khaybar put a very good fight, and they retreated to the second place, to the second fortification. And here the Muslims followed them immediately, and they also besieged that place and put a very great attack, and they could storm the second place also. When they stormed the second place, they retreated to the third fortification. And the Prophet ordered the believers to put everything they have in this particular fight, because obviously it was the beginning of the end of this Jewish power in the peninsula. And they started concentrating. They fought a very strong fight. A man called Abu Dujan al-Ansari became very famous for the fight on that particular day. They also put a great defense, and the Prophet was wounded in that battle also. So this is the second time that the Prophet was wounded in a battle. In spite of that, they attacked and they could storm that fortification, and they got all the prisoners. One of the prisoners was Safiya bint Hayy ibn Akhtab, and she is a very noble lady, the daughter of one of the great chiefs of this place. Eventually the Prophet released her, and he got married to Safiya following the same style. When the people found that there is no hope here, they wanted to have a treaty with the Prophet, or to have an agreement to surrender, and they offered that they will leave their money, take their clothes, and leave their weapon, and leave safely. The Prophet granted them that. However, there is a touch here that we should not overlook. They were supposed to leave everything behind. Out of these things that they left behind was papers of the Torah. So the Prophet said, give them their holy book, and he did not desecrate it, he did not confiscate it, he offered it to them. And this shows a model of freedom of religion that only Islam brought to humanity. The Muslims in this battle lost 15 people. The people of Khaybar, the Jews, lost about 93 people. During that time, important event is Khalid ibn al-Walid, the hero of Arabia, became a Muslim. He was one of three who became a Muslim altogether, and the Prophet was very happy with him and told Khalid, I am so grateful to God that he guided you. I always thought that you have such a brain that should lead you to what is true. Khalid responded, asking the Prophet to pray for him, because the fights he put against the Prophet, and the Prophet said a word which became a rule, Al-Islamu yaqta'u ma qabla. Islam starts a new page. Everything before Islam is null and void. We remember when the Prophet went to do Umrah, and he returned back without doing it, with the agreement that he will come next year. Now we are next year. And so the Prophet said, we are going to do Umrah. They told him, you are carrying weapons, you can't enter. He said, we'll make the weapons close to us. We will not be in the gear of fighting, but if there is a deception, we can reach our weapons. And then he ordered his followers to show that they are strong, and this is when the Prophet exposed his right arm, the way we do ihram now, to show the unbelievers that you are now facing very tough people. The unbelievers couldn't take it, so they left Mecca. They evacuated Mecca. They left it for the Muslims. Finish your Umrah and leave. We can't see you going around the Kaaba. This shows the prejudice and the very fanatic attitude that they had. Several confrontations happened until the 8th year of Hijrah, when an important confrontation called the Ghazwat Mu'tah, the Battle of Mu'tah. We mentioned before that one of the messengers of the Prophet, Al-Harith ibn Umayr al-Azdi, who was sent to the Prince of Bosra, which is a city in Bilad al-Sham, which is Syria, Palestine, and Lebanon now, and they killed him. So the Prophet found that this is the time to teach those people a lesson, and he then went and decided to prepare an army to go and punish them. And the instructions of the Prophet to the army are important to us. I'll say them in Arabic, then I translate. He said, اغزوا بسم الله فقاتلوا عدو الله وعدوكم بالشام وستجدون فيها رجالا في الصوامع معتزلين فلا تتعرضوا لهم ولا تقتلوا امرأة ولا صغيرا ولا بصيرا فانيا ولا تقطعوا شجرة ولا تهدموا بناء. And these are the instructions, and it is again the rules of war in Islam. He said, you fight in the name of God for the cause of God. You fight your enemy in this land and the enemy of God. You will find the people in places of worship. They isolated themselves in these places. Don't touch them. Don't stand in their way. Don't kill a woman or a child. Don't kill an old man, and never cut a tree or demolish a building. These are the teachings of the Prophet in that situation. When the Muslims reached there, they found that the other guys prepared for them a horrendous army. They were about 5 times or even more the number of the Muslim army. And there was a discussion there whether they should retreat and go back because they discovered that they were not ready for such a battle, or should they engage and fight. Abdullah ibn Ruwaha, who was one of the leaders, told them, we came out here to fight for the cause of God or die for the cause of God. So what is the hesitation for? And so they decided to fight. The 3 people that were assigned by the Prophet as leaders, one after the other, was martyred in this battle. One of them told the Muslims, it is better to die while you are advancing rather than to die while you are retreating. And they kept for about 7 days in a very strong, devastating fight. Khalid ibn al-Walid now is on the side of the Muslims. This is one of the early battles after his Islam. And he kept engaging the unbelievers for 7 days, buying time. Then he did one of his famous and clever tricks. He said the right part of the army should go to the left, and the left part to go to the right. The front should go to the back, and the back should go to the front. Sounds simple, but the unbelievers saw always new faces that they never saw before. So great commotion and movement amongst the believers. So they thought that the Prophet sent them a big supply, a big supply of power and of weapons. So they were very scared. They stopped fighting and retreated. And the Khalid ibn Walid took this chance and secured the army, and the Kafirs retreated and withdrew, and he went back to Medina. The interesting thing, when he went to Medina, people of Medina were not very happy because those guys did not achieve victory, a decisive victory. Khalid considered that saving the army here was a victory, which it was. And so they kept saying, Al-Furrar, Al-Furrar, means the runaways, the runaways. But the Prophet said, Bal humul Qurrar. They are the real attackers, because they took a maneuver that saved the army ready for another battle. And so this was a very important landmark also in this struggle. Several confrontations took place until the great battle of Al-Fath, Al-A'zam, the great victory, which is the surrender of Mecca. And this is really something that we should celebrate and we should ponder and should learn a lot from. Now there is a treaty with the unbelievers. There is a treaty with Quraysh for 4 years. It is not 4 years yet. And the Prophet and all the believers were just very impatiently waiting for the time to pass so that they reclaim Mecca. Allah Almighty makes reasons for everything. And what happened? There were a tribe, allied itself with Quraysh, called Bakr. And there was another group from Khuza'a, allied themselves with the Prophet. In the past, there was blood between these two tribes. There was animosity. It is only the treaty that held them without fighting. But what happened? A man from Bakr started saying poetry attacking the Prophet. So a man from the other tribe, now the Prophet is not involved, couldn't hear that defamation of the Prophet, so he attacked the guy and hit him. So the guy called his tribe, and this guy called his tribe, and fight erupted. Fight erupted between the allies. But the treaty is, if one of your allies attack us, there is no treaty no more. And definitely they went to the tribe that's allied to the Prophet and attacked them and killed 20 people of them in a deceptive attack, unexpected attack. They then broke the news to the Prophet, and so the treaty now practically, technically is null and void. Quraysh tried to prevent that, and they sent someone to salvage the situation. But nonetheless, they felt that this is the point of no return, and the Prophet decided that the treaty is no more. And we have to understand that because some of the Orientalists claim that the Prophet waited until he is strong and broke his treaty. No, they broke the treaty. The treaty was broken by the alliances. Abu Sufyan, who is the respected leader of Quraysh, a man of great caliber and stature, whether he is Muslim or non-Muslim, decided to go to the Prophet himself and went to Medina and went to his daughter, who is the wife of the Prophet, and said, I want you to talk. I want you to talk to your husband. He also sat or tried to sit on the place of the sleeping of the Prophet on something like a mattress. So she took it off, and he looked at his daughter and said, you think the mattress is not good enough for me, or you think that I am not good enough for the mattress? She said, while you are a kafir, you cannot sit on the mattress of the Messenger of God. Abu Sufyan said, an evil thing happened to you, my dear daughter. His negotiations were not very successful. Nonetheless, the Prophet said, we are continuing this year, but after that, I cannot guarantee anything. I will not give you any word. Then Abu Sufyan went back to Quraysh, told them what happened. They accused him that you entered Medina safely, you visited your daughter, and you came back with this news. You sold out. To the point that he went to Kaaba and prayed to the idols to prove to them that he is still a kafir. The Prophet prepared a huge army composed of all those who belonged to Islam or those who wanted to ally themselves with the Muslims. His maneuver was to impress Quraysh when they know that there is a war, that this is such a huge army that they better surrender the city peacefully. The Prophet was so keen that there should be no bloodshed in Mecca, and at least the Kaaba and the place around it should be safe and secure. This is why when the Prophet came close to Mecca, he ordered lighting up 10,000 fires. 10,000 fires in the night of the desert of Arabia, to show that he is coming with probably 50, 100,000 people, because each fire is supposed to be cooking for a group. So there were these maneuvers to try to put an impression on the enemy, but he was always hiding the fact that he is going to attack. They reached a place called Al-Abwa. He met with two who were really very strong enemies. They became Muslims, and this was very encouraging and was great news for the Prophet. And they apologized to the Prophet for what they have been doing, but the Prophet said, quoted the Quran, لا تثريب عليكم اليوم يغفر الله لكم وهو أرحم الراحمين. There is no blame on you now. Allah forgives you. He is the forgiving of merciful. He reached a place called Al-Kadid. They were in Ramadan. The Prophet noticed that the Muslims are very tired, so he said everyone should break his fasting. And he started by himself. He ate and he drank, and it became a rule that if you are traveling or if you are engaged in a battle, you break the fasting. And so he did. On the road, he met his uncle Al-Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib, leaving with his family and wanting to join the Prophet. So the Prophet told him, no, you join me to Mecca, let your family go to Medina. During that very critical period, Abu Sufyan was talked into Islam. So someone told him, you shouldn't stay stubborn, everything is clear, Muhammad prevailed, so you join Islam. And Abu Sufyan became a Muslim. And he was sitting there, standing there, seeing the troops passing. And the Prophet said, put him in a place where he can see the army. Started groups of the army passing by, each one is carrying their own flag, until came the smallest group, which was the group of the Prophet. The group of the Prophet was led by the Prophet, who was on the back of his camel, putting someone behind him, not even enjoying a comfortable ride, and so humble and lowering his head until his head almost touched the back of the camel, and he was crying and the tears getting his beard wet. Here is a situation where this is the victorious man, the victorious leader, the general, entering the last of all battles that are of significance. There is no arrogance, there is no show of victory, of vengeance, but he is a very humble man, grateful to God. And he declares the great declaration that everyone stays in his home will be safe. During that time, Khalid ibn Walid had problems entering from the other side of Mecca, and he engaged in a fight, and about 15 to 20 people were killed. But the side entrance of the Prophet was completely safe. He just walked in. And he said, anyone stays in his home is safe and secure. Anyone goes to the house of Abu Sufyan is safe and secure. Anyone who goes to Al-Haram, to the sanctuary around Kaaba, is safe and secure. We notice here that he gave a status to Abu Sufyan. This is very intelligent, because it is not for the best interest now to come to this very important leader, arrogant leader, who just became a Muslim, and treat with him as almost a prisoner of war. He made his house a sanctuary, a place where people can flock to, acknowledging his leadership and his importance. The Prophet entered and everybody stayed there, and they were waiting for the verdict. They kept looking at the Prophet, what he is going to do, and he asked them the famous question, what do you think I'm going to do with you? They said, Akhun Karimun wa ibn Akhun Karim, a noble brother and a noble cousin. So he said, go, you are the free. اذهبوا فأنتم الطلقاء. طلقاء means you are the one who are freed, liberated. And this group of people who converted to Islam at that time, always in the Islamic history called At-Tulaqa. And here a group from a tribe of Ka'b ibn Zuhair, the great Arabic poet who used to defame the Prophet, came to the Prophet and said that they wanted to be Muslims, and he accepted all of them. And the Ka'b ibn Zuhair after that became a famous man in singing the praise of the Prophet. After that, the Prophet took the bay'ah from the women, and they gave the bay'ah with the conditions that they live in chastity and they don't disobey God and disobey His Messenger, and they will never steal and they will tell the truth, all the values of Islam. And the Prophet destroyed the idols in Mecca and sent people, because not all the idols were in Mecca. Because not all the idols were around the Kaaba. There were idols in remote places like Al-Uzza and like Suwa and Mina. He sent people to destroy them, and by that time Islam is really established as a major power in Arabia. It's great victory. Almost all Arabia now is flocking to Islam. As the Quran said, يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا. They come to the religion of God in groups, in crowds. Except for two major tribes, Hawazin and Thaqif, they became very arrogant and they decided to get ready for Muhammad. They said after he finished his major enemies, he will turn against us. So let us recruit and gather and galvanize whoever is left to confront him. And they prepared a huge army with men and women behind them so that they don't allow themselves to be defeated. and they took all their cattle and sheep behind them also, and took the music and the hobla they make for major battles, so that they will leave no place for retreat. The Prophet mobilized his troops, and they were so many, and one of the believers said, لا نغلبن اليوم من قلة. We will not be defeated because of small numbers at all. However, there was a lesson waiting for them there, because there was a trap that the Kafirs put for them, and they really attacked them very severely. They were almost completely defeated and ran away in everywhere. And even some of the believers who converted to Islam recently from the Tulaqa, the ones who were relieved after the opening of Mecca, one of them said, Al-ana batul al-sihr. Now the magic is, the bluff is called, so to speak. While the Muslims were almost defeated, the Prophet stood there and called his famous call, Ana Nabiyyu la kadhib, Ana ibn Abdul Muttalib. I am the Prophet, there is no lie about it. I am the son of Ibn Abdul Muttalib. And he ordered Al-Abbas to call Ansar and to call Mujahajirin and call people who give him the pledge under the tree, calling them almost by group and by name. So they were encouraged and regrouped and surrounded the Prophet and put a good fight, and they defeated the unbelievers. And this is the last major confrontation that of course Quran recorded that in a blaming tone. وَيَوْمَ حُنَيْنٍ إِذْ أَعْجَبَتْكُمْ كَثْرَتُكُمْ فَلَمْ تُغْنِ عَنْكُمْ شَيْئًا. On the day of Hunayn, when you were so happy with your numbers and numbers didn't help you. After that, the Prophet mobilized to go to At-Ta'if. Remember At-Ta'if, when he was kicked out and he was humiliated and they refused to follow him. They were the remnants of Thaqif and Hawazin. He sent Khalid ibn al-Walid as the leader of this troop, and they went over there and they fought and they won this battle. And by that, the Prophet was praying to God, "Oh God, guide Thaqif to Islam." Some of the Sahaba told him, "Why don't you ask God to destroy them?" His response was, "Allahumma hdi Thaqifan wa'ati bihim muslimin." Oh Allah, guide them and let them come to us as Muslims, which eventually happened. People from Arabia and from Ash-Sham, that's the area of Syria, and from Hawazin and from different areas around Arabia started sending groups to meet with the Prophet. And the Prophet here, after this victory, did another Umrah in gratitude to God and showing how grateful he is. He met several delegates from different tribes. He welcomed them, and this was a very engaged area in the aftermath of the major battles, trying to settle peace in Arabia. And this will take the rest of the 8th year. Until the 9th year of Hijrah, there was another confrontation with the people, the tribe of Hatim ibn Tayy. Hatim ibn Tayy is in the chronicles of history as the most noble and generous man in Arabia. At that time he was already dead, but during this battle the Prophet got as a prisoner Sufana, who was the daughter of Hatim ibn Tayy. But the Prophet, acknowledging the history of her family and acknowledging her nobility, he released her and refused to let her be humiliated. And the Muslims did the same thing, and so her brother, who is the son of Hatim ibn Tayy, became a great Muslim, and they proceeded to spread Islam all over Arabia. The Prophet after that went back to Medina. So Medina is the capital of Islam. Although Mecca is the spiritual place, but Medina is where the state was born and where the capital of the state will always be. While he was in Medina, he started to prepare for the Battle of Tabuk. Why? Because he heard that the Romans are gathering now, very irritated, very upset to see Arabia now independent. As we mentioned before, they used to divide it and to put certain kings on the places that they like. They were not interested in Arabia, the desert, but definitely they were interested in Bilad al-Sham, they were interested in the coastal areas. So they created these kingdoms. Now there is a power in Arabia, liberating Arabia and having a central authority. So they were not very happy with it at all, and the Prophet started ordering to prepare a good army. On that year, this was a very difficult year economically. The dates and the palm trees and the cultivations were very poor. It is called the Am al-Usra, the year of difficulty. Nonetheless, the Prophet ordered anyways to prepare a huge army ready for that battle. He asked for donations, and here Muslims really opened that chapter of struggling or doing the jihad al-mal. And we find great models. Uthman ibn Affan gave lots of what he has. Abu Bakr gave all his money. And when the Prophet told him, "What are you leaving for your family?" he said, "I am leaving for them Allah and His Messenger." Umar ibn Khattab gave half of his wealth. So many people, all the women gave their jewelry. And Abdullah ibn Ubay said, "That man is getting wild now. He is going to fight the Romans. They will kill us. They will take us prisoners. And I am not going to join the battle. I'll find an excuse." And all the hypocrites came to the Prophet to be excused. And the Prophet gave them the excuse. "Okay, you don't want to come? Okay, I understand." Quran came correcting the Prophet. عَفَى اللَّهُ عَنْكَ لِمَا أَذِنْتَ لَهُمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَكَ الَّذِينَ صَدَقُوا وَتَعْلَمَ الْكَاذِبِينَ. This is in Surah Bara'ah number 10. May God forgive you. Why did you give them permission? Let them defect on their own, not with your permission, until we know exactly who is the true and who is the liar. And also the Quran said, إِنَّمَا يَسْتَأْذِنُكَ الَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَارْتَابَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ فَهُمْ فِي رَيْبِهِمْ يَتَرَدَّدُونَ. The ones who ask for excuses are not those who believe in Allah and in the Day of Judgment. They have doubts in their hearts, and they keep oscillating back and forth with these doubts and suspicions. And the Quran exposes them saying, وَلَوْ أَرَادُوا الْخُرُوجَ لَأَعَدُّوا لَهُ عُدَّةً وَلَكِنْ كَرِهَ اللَّهُ بِعَاثَهُمْ فَثَبَّطَهُمْ وَقِيلَ اقْعُدُوا مَعَ الْقَاعِدِينَ. If they really wanted to go with you, they should have been preparing themselves for it now. But they took no preparation. They didn't show practical steps confirming their intention to join the jihad. But Allah says, anyways, Allah didn't love for them to go out. He wanted them to sit behind. Because as the Quran again said, لو خرجوا فيكم ما زادوكم إلا خبالا ولا أوضعوا خلالكم يبغونكم الفتنة وفيكم سماعون لهم والله عليم بالظالمين. The meaning of that is, if they joined you to the battle, they will be a liability. They will increase the confusion. They will set discord amongst your ranks. But the important thing, وَفِيكُمْ سَمَّعُونَ لَهُمْ. You, the believers, amongst you people who listen, who receive this false news and can really be vulnerable to this group. There were some of the believers not accused of hypocrisy. Nonetheless, they did not join. And so 3 of them did not join the battle. The Prophet arranged the army and divided it under several leaderships and prepared everything for a major battle. During that time, he received a delegate from a place called Ayla in that area. And they came and they had a treaty with the Prophet. Several people actually approached the Prophet for similar treaties from that area, which is the buffer zone between the Roman Empire and Arabia proper. While the Prophet was very busy doing that, he heard that some people built a new mosque called Masjid al-Dirar. It was given the word al-Dirar later on. A people of the hypocrites tried to steal the focus of light from Masjid Quba, the very early Masjid of Islam, and said, we'll have another masjid here, and their purpose was to split the Muslims. And the Prophet was not happy with that, and he ordered that Masjid al-Dirar to be destroyed. As a matter of fact, before destroying it, the Prophet questioned them, said, why did you build this masjid? They swore by God that in aradna ila al-husna, we just meant well. And the Quran says, وَاللَّهُ يَشْهَدُ إِنَّهُمْ لَكَاذِبُونَ. God knows that they are lying. When they came close to Tabuk, the Romans decided to withdraw from Tabuk to enter their borders, and the Prophet spent all the time making treaties with the different tribes that are on the borders, creating a buffer zone between Arabia and the power of the Roman Empire. We go back now to the three who were left behind, this group of evaders who did not join the battle. When the Prophet saw them, he was smiling, but in a way that's showing sadness. And he started asking them, why didn't you join? He asked a man of them, called Ka'b, why didn't you join the battle? The man told him, the easiest thing, O Messenger of God, is to find an excuse, and you will accept it because you accepted all excuses. But I cannot do that with you. You are the messenger of God. I just have no reason. I cannot offer you an excuse or a convincing reason. I just did not. The Prophet turned his face away from him. There were three people of that situation. And it was obvious that the Prophet is not talking to them. And so all the believers refused to talk to them. One of them, his wife, took a special permission from the Prophet to serve him because he was not feeling well. And he gave her the permission. But the community boycotted those three people. And it was so hard on them, to the point that the Quran describes them as وَعَلَى الثَّلَاثَةِ الَّذِينَ خُلِّفُوا حَتَّى إِذَا ضَاقَتْ عَلَيْهِمُ الْأَرْضُ بِمَا رَحُبَتْ وَضَاقَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ أَنفُسُهُمْ وَظَنُّوا أَن لَا مَلْجَأَ مِنَ اللَّهِ إِلَّا إِلَيْهِ. Those three who were left behind, who evaded, until the whole earth became so narrow and so closing on them, and their hearts were so tight, and they felt that they cannot run away from Allah except to Him, ask His protection only. After that, they were forgiven. It was a very joyous day when this verse was revealed, because people who never talked to them rushed to them and said, the glad news, you have been forgiven. Quran talked about you. After the Prophet came back from Tabuk, he received a group from Thaqif. They went to the Prophet and wanted to negotiate with him. They were refusing to be Muslims completely, and they were very stubborn in refusing Islam. The Prophet received them in his mosque, and he ordered that a place will be prepared for them in the mosque, and he said something very wise. He said, leave them here, let them live with us and see us, and let them observe us praying. They were very impressed with what they saw. They used to leave a young boy to guard their luggage, and this young boy, after they leave, he sneaks in and goes to the Prophet and asks him to teach him Quran. And the Prophet used to teach him Quran. When the people were so impressed and became Muslims, they wanted the Prophet to assign for them an imam, a person who knows Quran, to be their leader. So assigned this servant, this young servant. He said, this will be your imam. He wrote then to the people of At-Ta'if, who now realized that they cannot stand against the Prophet, but they requested a very interesting request from him. They told him, you know how our people are hot-headed and hot-blooded people. We don't want you to destroy our idol for 1 month, until we just take people gradually. The strange thing is that the Prophet accepted that. He said, we'll leave the idol for you for 1 month, you work on it. One of their arguments was, our simple-minded will be so taken aback if you destroy the idol. Now, he said, okay, we'll give you the time to educate them and work on them, and this showing another wisdom of the Prophet. At the month of the Qa'dah, the Prophet ordered Abu Bakr now to go and perform Hajj. Abu Bakr took 300 people from Medina and took all the cattle and sheep and Al-Hajj as they do, and went there to do Al-Hajj. And it's called Yawm al-Hajj al-Akbar, the great day of Hajj. Then during that time, Surah Bara'ah was revealed, and Surah Bara'ah is stating the relationship between the Prophet and the people of Arabia at that time. We'll try to get the introduction of this surah because it is of significance and is of importance in that situation. Surah Bara'ah, which is also called Surah At-Tawbah, is surah number 10 of the Quran. The Tawbah means repentance. It is the only surah of the Quran that is not beginning Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, compassionate and merciful. It is just directly starting براءة من الله ورسوله إلى الذين عاهدتم من المشركين فسيحوا في الأرض 4 أشهر واعلموا أنكم غير معجز الله وأن الله مخزي الكافرين وأذان من الله ورسوله إلى الناس يوم الحج الأكبر أن الله بريء من المشركين ورسوله فإن تبتم فهو خير لكم وإن توليتم فاعلموا أنكم غير معجز الله وبشر الذين كفروا بعذاب أليم إلا الذين عاهدتم من المشركين ثم لم ينقصوكم شيئا ولم يظاهروا عليكم أحدا فأتموا إليهم عدتهم إلى مدتهم إن الله يحب المتقين فإذا انسلخ الأشهر الحرم فاقتلوا المشركين حيث وجدتموهم وخذوهم واحصروهم واقعدوا لهم كل مرصد فإن تابوا وأقاموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة فخلوا سبيلهم إن الله غفور رحيم وإن أحد من المشركين استجارك فأجره حتى يسمع كلام الله ثم أبلغه مأمنه ذلك بأنهم قوم لا يعلمون. Those are the first 6 verses of the surah, and I'll paraphrase the meaning that from now on Allah and His Messenger have nothing to do with those whom you had treaties with amongst those who associate deities with God. He gives them an amnesty for 4 months. You roam all over the place, but remember that you cannot conquer Allah and His Messenger, and those who are bent on denying the truth will fail. And here is a declaration from Allah and His Messenger to all people on the day of the major Hajj, that Allah is separating Himself and His Messenger from those who associate deities to God. If you repent, it is better for you. If you turn away, remember that you cannot prevail over God, and those who are bent on denying the truth will have grievance punishment waiting for them. This concludes the 9th year of Hijrah, and I ask Allah to guide us to learn from the great lessons. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.